Picture this, temperatures 40 degrees below zero. Wind ripping across a landscape with no trees, no buildings, nothing but ice and open sky for hundreds of miles. Now, picture standing in the middle of that, wearing nothing. No jacket, no fire, no shelter. You would not survive the hour, let alone the night. And yet somehow, actual human beings did this. Not just survived it, but thrived for tens of thousands of years during the coldest, harshest climate our species has ever faced, the Ice Age. No down jackets, no thermostats, no grocery stores. Just raw ingenuity and some of the most insane survival hacks in human history. Today, we're breaking down exactly how ancient humans pulled this off. Shelter, fire, clothing, and food. And by the end of this video, you're going to look at your own heating system completely differently. Let's start with the most basic problem. Where do you even sleep when there isn't a single tree for miles? Because that was the reality across huge stretches of Ice Age Europe. This period is often called the Mammoth Steppe, a treeless, frozen grassland stretching from Ireland all the way to Alaska. No wood, and in a lot of these regions, no caves either. So what did people build their homes out of? The animals themselves. At a site called Mezerich in modern-day Ukraine, archaeologists uncovered something almost unbelievable. The remains of huts built entirely from mammoth bones. Skulls stacked as a foundation, tusks curved and interlocked to form doorways, long bones layered like architectural beams. Researchers estimate these structures use bones from dozens of mammoths, likely animals that had already died naturally or been scavenged, not all hunted fresh. The bones were then covered with hides, creating a windproof, insulated dome. Some of these mammoth bone dwellings date back roughly 15,000 years, making them some of the oldest known evidence of human architecture on the planet. But bones alone weren't enough. Many Ice Age groups also dug their shelters partially into the ground, creating what archaeologists call semi-subterranean pit houses. Why go through the effort of digging into frozen earth? Because the ground itself acts as insulation. Even a few feet below the surface, temperatures stay far more stable than the brutal wind chill above. Combine a sunken floor, a bone and hide frame, and a central fire pit, and you've basically built an Ice Age insulated tent. Thousands of years before anyone invented the word insulation. If shelter kept the wind out, fire is what actually kept people alive. Ice Age humans treated fire less like a convenience and more like a piece of infrastructure you could never, ever let die. Archaeological hearths, essentially ancient fire pits, show up again and again at Ice Age sites, often lined with stones to hold and radiate heat more efficiently. Some researchers believe these stone linings functioned almost like a primitive thermal battery, absorbing heat during the day and slowly releasing it through the coldest hours of the night. That single design choice could mean the difference between waking up and not waking up. But keeping a fire burning wasn't simple. Without matches or lighters, starting a new fire from scratch was slow and unreliable, especially in freezing, damp conditions. So instead of constantly restarting fires, many groups appear to have prioritized keeping embers alive continuously, sometimes carrying smoldering material with them when they moved between camps. Lose that ember, and you could be facing hours or even days without heat. Fire did more than warm bodies, too. It transformed raw meat into something safer and easier to digest. It helped harden and shape tools, and some researchers theorize that heat-treating certain types of stone actually made them easier to chip into sharper, more reliable blades. And of course, fire was the barrier between a sleeping camp and every predator circling in the dark. A burning fire signals danger to almost every large predator on Earth, which meant for early humans, fire wasn't just warmth, it was a shield. Here's something people don't think about enough. Surviving the Ice Age wasn't just about your shelter or your campfire. It was about what was touching your skin every single hour of every single day. And this is where things get genuinely impressive. At a site called Sungir in modern-day Russia, archaeologists uncovered burials dating back around 30,000 years, containing thousands of small ivory beads. At first, that might just sound like decoration, but when researchers mapped exactly where those beads were positioned on the bodies, a pattern emerged. The beads lined up in rows consistent with fitted clothing, like sleeves, trousers, and even shoes. This suggests these weren't just simple animal skin wraps thrown over the shoulders. This was tailored, layered clothing sewn directly onto the body's silhouette. And sewing requires a tool most people don't associate with the Ice Age: the needle. Archaeologists have recovered needles carved from bone and ivory, some with tiny eye holes barely wide enough for a strand of sinew thread. Making one of these by hand, using only stone tools, would have taken real skill and patience. But that needle changed everything. Instead of just draping a hide over your shoulders, you could now shape multiple layers of fur and hide into fitted garments. A base layer, an insulating layer, and an outer layer to block wind and snow. Essentially, the same principle modern outdoor gear is built on today. Some researchers even believe this leap in clothing technology may have helped early humans push into colder territories, regions where Neanderthals, who left far less evidence of complex sewn clothing, seemingly struggled to survive. Warmth, it turns out, might have been a genuine evolutionary advantage. So you've got shelter, fire, and clothing sorted. Now the hardest problem of all: food. Because a frozen landscape doesn't exactly offer year-round fruit stands. Ice Age humans solved this with something we still rely on today, just without electricity: freezing. The ground itself, especially permafrost, acted as a natural freezer. Groups would dig storage pits into frozen soil and pack them with meat, essentially creating cold storage that could preserve a kill for weeks, sometimes longer, without spoiling. Archaeologists have identified what they believe were these kinds of cache pits at multiple Ice Age sites, some containing preserved animal remains positioned in a way that suggests deliberate, planned storage rather than random discard. Beyond freezing, fat was survival gold. Animal fat is incredibly calorie-dense, which mattered enormously in an environment demanding huge amounts of energy just to stay warm. Bone marrow, in particular, was treated as a prized resource, extracted by cracking bones open, something researchers can actually identify in the archaeological record through distinctive fracture patterns on ancient animal bones. Nothing went to waste. Fat could also be rendered down and used not just as food, but reportedly as fuel for small stone lamps, creating a controlled flame for light inside a shelter, separate from the main fire. And when fresh meat wasn't an option, drying it out removed the moisture bacteria need to grow, extending how long it could last. An early, low-tech version of the jerky sitting in your pantry right now. None of this worked in isolation either. Shelter, fire, clothing, food, these weren't separate hacks. They were one interconnected survival system. And losing any single piece of it could be fatal. So the next time your thermostat clicks on, or you throw on a jacket without a second thought, remember, none of that existed for the people who somehow made it through the harshest climate in human history. No stores, no factories, no shortcuts. Just bone, fire, fur, and an absolutely relentless will to survive. And honestly, that's kind of the whole story of us. Let me know in the comments which one of these Ice Age survival tricks blows your mind the most. See you in the next one.